The first time Daren Pike heard about the virus, he was bent over a cracked coolant manifold on the underbelly of a Cerealian freighter, elbow-deep in hydraulic gel, swearing his way through yet another misaligned seal. "Pike," came a voice from above, filtered through static. "You need to report to Mebe. Now." Daren squinted up at the comm panel bolted to the maintenance hatch. "For what?" "I'm in the middle of a heat sink failure. This thing's gonna roast itself from the inside out in 20 minutes. Captain's orders. Get to Mebe." "It's a quarantine advisory." Daren swore again, wiped his hands on a rag that achieved nothing, and climbed out from under the vessel. He didn't move with urgency. Quarantine advisories were about as common on the Cerealian trade routes as overpriced docking fees. Some alien sneezed and suddenly everyone needed a scan. When he reached Med Bay, the lights were dimmed, and the air had that sharp scent of sterilization. Dr. Rel-Lin, a three-eyed thexery with a tendency to over-explain simple things, was already scanning a tall, blue-hued Elvari trader who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Sit," Rel-Lin said without looking at Daren. He waved a scanner vaguely toward the examination chair. "Daren, Saturday, you gonna tell me what this is about or just prod at me until something beeps?" Rel-Lin finally looked up. "We've identified a pathogen. Not local. It was detected in 3 crew members of the cargo ship Orsa's Thorn. One of them collapsed mid-transaction in the docking bay." "Collapsed how?" "Neurological degradation. Fever escalation. Cognitive dissonance. Symptoms are progressing rapidly and unpredictably. It's jumping species faster than we can track." Daren frowned. "Sounds bad." Rel-Lin nodded grimly. "It's worse than bad. We've already logged 32 cases across 4 species. The containment protocols have failed twice." Daren leaned back. "And what about humans?" Rel-Lin looked at his scanner, paused. "You should have presented symptoms by now if you were infected. But we're still observing. The strain is mutating." "Mutating?" Daren raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a flu." Rel-Lin's 3 eyes narrowed. "Flu? This is not a flu, Pike. This is a cross-species viral anomaly with the potential to destabilize entire trade networks." Daren chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, still sounds like the flu." Rel-Lin didn't respond. He just tapped a control on the wall, and a sealed panel slid open to reveal a containment room filled with groaning, sweating aliens in various states of distress. One of them, a Journali courier with skin that should have been green, was now mottled gray and twitching. "Still laughing?" Rel-Lin asked. Daren's smile faded. "Okay, that's not normal." "No, it's not," Rel-Lin said. "And neither is the fact that humans are walking around like nothing's wrong." 2 days later, Daren was summoned to the station's diplomatic hall. He wasn't technically authorized for anything beyond maintenance, but the captain insisted. When he entered the chamber, he was greeted by an awkward silence. A half-circle of alien delegates stared at him. Some wore breathing masks. Others had translator nodes blinking furiously. At the center was a tall, skeletal-looking being with translucent skin and eyes like polished bone. "Daren Pike," it said, with a voice like wind through broken glass. "You are human. I've been told that, yeah. You have been exposed to the pathogen designated Virex 9. Apparently, you exhibit no symptoms." "Also true." The being tilted its head. "Explain." Daren blinked. "Explain. Why I'm not sick?" "Yes. I don't know. Maybe I've got a good immune system. Maybe it doesn't like humans. Ever think of that?" The delegates murmured among themselves. A short, orange-furred alien with 6 limbs spoke up. "It has infected every known oxygen-based biology except yours. This is statistically improbable." Daren scratched his chin. "We've had some bad bugs on Earth. Maybe this one's just not bad enough." The skeletal being leaned forward. "You do not understand. This virus has killed 16 Volari. It has liquefied the lungs of a Drosk. It has dismantled our entire approach to immunology." "Sounds awful," Daren said. "But I feel fine. There was more murmuring. Finally, the captain of the station, a hard-faced woman named Thea Morin, stepped beside Daren. "We want a team of your doctors to examine him," she said, "and test any other humans aboard. We need answers." Daren raised a hand. "Whoa, I didn't sign up to be a lab rat." "You're already in the middle of an interspecies crisis," Thea said. "You're going to help whether you like it or not." The next 48 hours were a blur of blood tests, breath samples, and questions that made Daren wish he'd taken that job inspecting or haulers on Mars. The medical team, 3 aliens and 1 human from a diplomatic exchange program, poked and prodded him with every scanning tool in the galaxy. One of them, a tall, feathery alien named Kel, was obsessed with mucus. "Your nasal discharge is unusually thick." "Thanks," Daren said flatly. "Do you always produce this volume during minor infections?" "It's not an infection. I get this every winter. We call it the common cold." Kel recoiled like he'd been slapped. "You are infected right now?" "Yeah. Had the sniffles for 2 days. Didn't think it was worth mentioning." Kel turned to the others, horrified. "He is symptomatic." "No," the human doctor, Maratolan, said. "That's just how colds work on Earth. But he has viral presence in his respiratory tract." Mara sighed. "Yes, rhinovirus. Harmless. Extremely common." Kel looked at Daren like he was some sort of walking biohazard. "You survive this regularly?" "Yeah. We drink soup, stay in bed for a day, and watch bad television." Mara nodded. "Humans have co-evolved with a vast range of respiratory viruses. Their immune systems are incredibly adaptable." Kel leaned closer to Daren. "How many viruses have you hosted in your body?" Daren raised an eyebrow. "What kind of question is that?" By the end of the week, panic spread across the station. Virex 9 had mutated again. The containment zone expanded by 2 decks. Supplies were rerouted. Incoming ships were turned away. Station guards wore full isolation suits. The only people moving freely were humans, which made them targets. Daren was cornered near the reactor ducts by 4 Zarn soldiers, tall and armored, with rifles slung across their backs. "You will come with us." "Why?" "The Council requires further samples. Your blood may hold the key. I gave enough blood to start a donation bank." "You will come." Daren didn't argue. He'd seen what happened to the last guy who resisted. They dragged him off to isolation, and he hadn't come back. This time, the testing wasn't limited to needles and swabs. They ran simulations, exposed his blood to viral samples, tested antibodies, and even tried replicating his white blood cells synthetically. It didn't work. Whatever made Daren resilient wasn't replicable. "It's not just immunity," Kel said, pacing. "It's the human immune response. It's chaotic, unpredictable, aggressive." Daren sat on the examination table, arms crossed. "So we're stubborn at the cellular level. Makes sense." "It's not funny. I wasn't trying to be." Kel stopped pacing. "The virus is now airborne. Full transmission. We've lost 2 more decks." Mara looked up from her screen. "We need to test a full human population. A control group." "There are only 12 humans on this station," Kel said. "Then we need more." Daren stood. "You want to import humans mid-outbreak?" "Yes," Kel said. "They may be the only species that can walk through this without dying." Daren looked at the containment map on the wall. It was more red than green now. "Then you better start asking nicely." 3 hours after being told he might be the accidental savior of a galactic outpost, Daren Pike was sitting on a metal crate in Cargo Bay 6, peeling the foil off a ration bar with his teeth. The stale chocolate flavor was only slightly better than chewing on a boot sole, but it was his first break since the medical team had dragged him through what felt like a full-body interrogation. Across from him, a hulking Venery logistics officer moved crates with deliberate care, his mandibles clacking rhythmically as he worked. Daren tried not to stare at the translucent sacs along the alien's back. Something about the way they pulsed unsettled him. "You are the immune one," the Venery said without turning. Daren chewed. "Apparently. You gonna ask for a blood sample too? I'm running out of veins." "I have no authority for that. I am only curious." "Well, curiosity's fine. Just don't try to swab me with one of those tentacle things." The Venery paused, then turned, revealing a pair of wide, vertical eyes. "We have no tentacles. That is a false assumption. Could have fooled me. I find your resilience unsettling." Daren shrugged. "Most people do." The Venery approached, slow and deliberate. "If humans survive what others cannot, then you are a vector, a carrier species. That's not how we work. I'm not a walking bioweapon. Perhaps not intentionally." The crate under Daren creaked as he stood. "I'm not here to start a pandemic, all right? I fix ships. That's supposed to be the most boring job on this station." A nearby panel beeped. The overhead lights dimmed by a fraction, then flickered once. The Venery stiffened. "Power redistribution. The isolation decks are drawing too much energy. Guess they're getting crowded. Too crowded. The infection rate has surpassed projections again. And here I am," Daren muttered, "eating a rock-hard protein bar while the galaxy melts down." The Venery leaned in slightly. "If you cannot be infected, you should be helping." "I already did," Daren said. "They took enough blood to fill a bathtub and poked holes in places no needle should ever go." "That is insufficient." "Yeah, well, I'm not volunteering for round 2. He turned to leave, but the bay door opened before he reached it. 3 station security officers entered, flanked by a pair of compact, wheeled drones carrying sealed crates. "Pike," one of the officers said, "you've been reassigned." "To what? Bleeding professionally?" "You're escorting a quarantine delivery to the temporary human ward. Orders from Captain Morin." Daren looked at the drones. "That's medical cargo? Protective equipment, testing kits, and human food supplements. You're the only one on this deck cleared for movement between sectors without full containment." "Great," Daren muttered. "Because I'm the magic disease unicorn." The Venery watched silently as Daren followed the officers out. It took nearly half an hour to navigate the rerouted corridors. The station's architecture was never elegant to begin with, more like a giant steel termite mound, but now it felt like a maze designed by someone who hated right angles. The security officers didn't talk much. Their suits hissed slightly with every step, the sound of built-in filters working overtime. The human ward was in an unused wing of the habitation ring. Newly converted, it smelled of ozone and recycled air. A few cots had been laid out behind translucent partitions. Only 6 of them were occupied. Daren recognized 2 of the faces, engineers from the maintenance crew. The others were newcomers, probably redirected from incoming vessels before the lockdown. "Delivery for the Invincible," Daren said, pushing one of the crates toward a table near the back. A woman with short hair and oil-stained coveralls looked up. "You're Pike, right? The guy they're poking like a lab mouse?" "They stopped poking," Daren said. "Started asking me to deliver lunch instead." One of the newcomers approached. He was lean, with sun-darkened skin and a military haircut that had grown out just enough to look accidental. "Name's Keller," he said. "I was supposed to be on a shuttle to the Tarsus outpost. Got rerouted here when the outbreak started." "Tarsus is shut down," Daren said. "They're 3 days behind us on medical infrastructure." Keller nodded. "So I heard. We're lucky to be here." A drone beeped and extended a mechanical arm, offering a sealed container of meal packs. Daren grabbed one and tossed it to Keller. "Looks like barbecue," he said. "Which probably means it tastes like cardboard dipped in sugar." Keller caught it, raised an eyebrow. "I've eaten worse." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Keller asked, "That thing, the virus, is it really as bad as they're saying?" Daren looked over at the security officers who were checking one of the wall-mounted air filters. "Worse. It doesn't care what you are, only that you breathe. And humans, we don't get sick. Or if we do, we get a sniffle and go back to work. Keller looked around the room. Then why are they locking us up? Because they think we're either the cure or the start of the next wave. Keller nodded slowly. That tracks. The lights flickered again. One of the partitions rippled as the internal atmosphere scrubbers adjusted. You ever seen a containment failure up close? Keller asked. Daren shook his head. I've seen what's left after one, though. Me too. On a mining station near Arcanes. They didn't even have time to scream. There wasn't much to say after that. The next morning, Daren was dragged out of the human ward at what felt like dawn, though time was meaningless inside the station. He was still pulling on his boots when two Zarn medics met him outside the door, along with Mara Tolan. Walk with us, she said. He fell into step beside her. More tests? No. Something new. Define new. We sequenced your T cells last night. There's a pattern we didn't see before. A protein fold that reacts aggressively to the virus at first contact. Meaning? You don't fight it off slowly. You annihilate it. On entry. Okay. That sounds good. Not for us. The response is too fast to replicate in other species. It's like trying to replicate a lightning strike. They turned down a narrow access corridor marked for maintenance use only. The floors were scuffed and the walls showed signs of previous patch jobs. So what's the plan? Daren asked. We need to simulate your immune response externally. How? By filtering your blood through a live viral culture. Daren stopped. Let me guess. You want to build a synthetic immunity filter. Exactly. Using me as the base. For now. He sighed. And if it doesn't work? We'll know quickly. They reached a sealed door with a hazard glyph Daren didn't recognize. Mara keyed in a code and the door hissed open. Inside, a chamber buzzed softly with energy. A cylindrical machine sat at the center, filled with translucent fluid and ringed with cables. This is the prototype, she said. We call it the Pike engine. Daren stared. You named it after me? You're the only one it works on. He stepped forward, eyeing the machine warily. So what's step one? Sit in the chair. That's step one. And then we start the flow. Daren glanced at the tubing, the vials, the blinking monitors. Why'd I feel like this is going to hurt? Mara didn't answer. She was already prepping the interface. Great, he muttered. Magic disease unicorn rides again. Daren Pike had been through a lot in the last week, but nothing had prepared him for the sensation of watching his own blood cycle through a transparent coil into a humming machine named after him. The Pike engine, as the medical team proudly called it, was less of an engine and more of a hybrid between a dialysis unit and a glorified blender. It pulsed with a faint blue light, casting flickering shadows across the containment lab's walls. I can feel it pulling, Daren muttered, flexing his fingers as the tubing in his arm twitched slightly. That's the immunoreactive filtration, Mara said, monitoring the output levels with a handheld scanner. Your T cells are interacting with the viral proteins in real time. We're capturing the byproducts. Don't move. That's very comforting, he replied, glancing at the reinforced glass window separating him from the observation team. On the other side, a group of alien physicians watched with an intensity that suggested they were either deeply fascinated or one electrical surge away from bolting. A short, scale-skinned Arvulan tapped on the glass with a stylus. Tell him not to sneeze. The last containment burst was due to a pressure shift from a journali cough. I'm not planning to sneeze, Daren said louder. But thanks for the encouragement. Mara adjusted the fluid pressure dial. We're almost at saturation point. If the antigen response holds, we might be able to synthesize a passive immunity serum. Which means we inject it into others and hope their bodies don't react like it's molten acid. Wonderful. The machine gave a low, rhythmic whine as the cultured virus was introduced into the secondary chamber. Daren narrowed his eyes at the shifting colors inside the containment cylinder. You sure that's safe? No, Mara answered flatly. The Arvulan on the other side of the glass looked up. Reaction beginning. Viral density decreasing. Human leukocyte fusion appears stable. Daren exhaled. That sounds good. It is, Mara said. We're seeing an accelerated breakdown of the virus. Your immune cells are shredding it like paper in a turbine. A taller alien, this one with glistening antennae and a body shaped like a walking pine cone, approached the window. If this works, we must secure enough samples for the other sectors. You're not draining me dry, Daren called over. I'm helpful, not bottomless. We can amplify the proteins once we isolate them, Mara explained. We just need a baseline. The pinecone-shaped one tilted its head. Does he need to eat during the process? I'm standing right here, Daren said. And yes, actually, I didn't sign up to be a fasting miracle. Mara handed him a nutrient bar from the side tray. Chew slowly. We don't want to spike your cortisol. As he gnawed at the bar, the machine's hum softened. The lights on its base blinked green. It's done, Mara said. We've got a viable sample. The room behind the glass erupted into motion. Panels opened, data rushed across displays, and one of the aliens started clapping awkward, slow, and entirely out of rhythm. Mara disconnected the tubing from Daren's arm with a practiced twist and slapped a bandage over the insertion point. You just became the most valuable human in 3 systems. I was already valuable, he said. You should see the way I realign heat exchangers. They transferred the serum to a collection of sealed vials, each stored in a shockproof, temperature-controlled case. Within 30 minutes, the first dose was administered to a Groxian technician in stage 2 infection who had been in quarantine for 3 days. 3 hours later, the technician sat up, blinked, and asked for a sandwich. By the next morning, 4 more patients had been treated with the synthesized serum. 3 recovered without complications. The 4th, a bulbous, violet-skinned merchant with 6 livers and a fondness for fermented algae, claimed to feel rejuvenated if slightly hungry. The station's intercom system broadcast the results station-wide. For the first time in over a week, the panic subsided. Daren sat in the human ward's communal area, sipping an aggressively bland electrolyte drink while Keller ran a makeshift card game using printed schematics as substitutes for face cards. You hear what they're calling it? Keller asked, laying down a hand that consisted of a fuel injector, 2 coolant valves, and something labeled emergency purge manifold. No, Daren said. What? Pike's solution. Daren made a face. That sounds like a plumbing fix. Better than human mucus miracle, which was the runner-up. Another human, a soft-spoken agricultural tech named Nina, glanced up from her terminal. You're going to be in medical textbooks now. Maybe even a cautionary tale. Cautionary? Daren asked. Yeah. About what happens when you ignore a cough and end up curing a galactic virus. Keller chuckled. He didn't ignore it. He just didn't care. A chime sounded from the overhead system, followed by Captain Morin's voice. All personnel. Full lockdown has been lifted for non-infected sectors. Human movement restrictions are officially rescinded. Medical clearance required for outbound travel only. Thank you for your cooperation. Daren stood, stretched, and rolled his shoulder. Guess that's my cue to go back to fixing coolant systems. Keller tossed a schematic into the pile. You sure they'll let you go back to being a mechanic? I'm hoping they forget I exist. Maybe I'll sneak out the airlock and stow away on a garbage scow. Before Keller could respond, the doors hissed open and Mara stepped in, holding a small case. This is the last of the base serum, she said. We've synthesized enough for emergency reserves. The rest is being distributed to frontier outposts. Daren raised an eyebrow. That mean I'm finally off the hook? You're discharged from testing, Mara said. But they'd like you to attend a debrief with the Coalition Medical Assembly. Sounds tedious. It is. But they're offering hazard pay. Now we're talking. She set the case down and opened it, revealing a single vial inside. We're keeping 1 dose here, just in case. Daren nodded. Smart. Mara hesitated. You did something extraordinary. I sneezed on a test strip and drank a lot of water. She smiled faintly. Exactly. Later that cycle, Daren walked the length of the station's central ring, watching as shops reopened and workers returned to their posts. The air no longer smelled of panic and sterilizers, but something closer to normal, burnt coffee, old lubricant, and ozone. He passed a group of alien children clustered around a kiosk displaying a newsfeed. His face appeared on the screen for a moment, flanked by unreadable glyphs and a headline in 4 languages. One of the kids pointed at him, then back at the screen. He gave a small wave and kept walking. By the time he reached the repair bay, a fresh work order was already waiting. The coolant manifold on docking arm 3 had ruptured again. He grabbed his toolkit and descended into the crawl space with a sigh of relief. Finally, something he could fix that didn't involve saving the galaxy. As he tightened the bolts and wiped away the hydraulic residue, the overhead intercom buzzed softly. Maintenance Technician Daren Pike, you have one unread message from the Coalition Medical Assembly. He reached up and clicked it off. He'd read it later. Maybe.